Hi, this is Marie Roker-Jones, Senior Editor with the Good Men Project and founder of Raising Great Men. I am so sorry that we started our hangout late. We were having some technical difficulties, and thankfully they've been resolved, and we're here, and we're excited about speaking to our guest tonight about this topic that is so important. And Dr. Vibe and I, who is my co-host for these Man You Want to Be monthly talks, we've been wanting to do this for a while, so we are so honored and appreciate that David and Steve Silverman, David Miller and Steve Silverman will be our guests tonight. David will be on a little shortly, but Steve Silverman from flexyourrights.org is here, so we're excited about that. And Steve, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a few minutes after Dr. Vibe say his hello, because I think I always let my guests introduce themselves so that they can give they're the best selling points of who they are and what they want to say about themselves. So Dr. Vibe, you have a few words?
Yes, as always, I'm blessed, highly favored, magnet for miracles, always excited and jacked to be on the air with you, and always a great place to be with our great guests that you get on these hangouts, and I'm really interested to hear what Steve and hopefully David have to share with us tonight. So let's take it from there.
And Steve, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a few minutes after Dr. Vibe.
I'm having a hi. Thanks for having me. I just wanted to mention that I'm getting feedback where I'm hearing Marie talking and Dr. Vibe talking at the same time, and I'm not exactly sure which voice to attune myself to.
So Steve, are you working from a laptop?
I'm working from a desktop.
Okay, you don't. Okay. I hear background. I hear echo in the background too.
So I think it's the video. I hear the video playing. Does anybody have it open? Maybe.
No, I'm having a. Yeah. So yeah, someone. Okay, I think.
That would be me who has it open and now has it closed.
Okay.
Welcome to
I love it. The blamer and the blame.
Found the culprit.
All right. First hangout. Born yesterday. Okay.
No worries. It happens.
Yeah. So I think, Steve, I think it's time for us to hear a little bit about yourself.
All right, then. My name's Steve. I'm the executive director and founder of Flex Your Rights. We're an organization that works to educate people about how to assert their Bill of Rights protections during police encounters.
Excellent. Marie?
So as always, I always let Dr. Vibe kick this off with his questions. And so what I want to make clear tonight is that this conversation is mostly about knowing your rights and what to do in a police encounter. We want to make sure that anybody who's viewing or have questions understand that this is not for us to have a discussion about whether police are good or bad. This is really about what you need to do, what you need to tell your sons and daughters, because this is happening with women too, and what you need to do for yourself to protect yourself if you're stopped by the police. So I just wanted to make sure I stress that so that people aren't taking the conversation to another direction, because we're going to be continuing this conversation, and I know I'm going to keep doing this on the Good Men Project in the Raising Boys section. So I just want to make sure that we emphasize that. And Steve and David, they both have really great information that's also available for you to buy. So after the broadcast, please check out their websites, but support what they're doing, because this is hard work, and they've put a lot of time, research, and money into making sure these resources are available for us. So that's it. So Dr. Vibe, take it away.
Thank you so much. It may be a very simple conversation piece, but after reading about you, what got you into the pursuit of this subject or this issue? Because I find it interesting what you're doing, but what was the catalyst to get you involved in this issue?
I mean, the really simple answer is that I knew a little bit about the law, And I realized simply that my friends, a lot of whom were social justice activists of various sorts, didn't know the basic rules of search and seizure. During a police encounter, for example, friends of mine insisted that police officers had the right to search you in your car during a police encounter, and they didn't need probable cause. And you know, I found myself in these conversations just saying, no, you've got that wrong. You have the right to actually refuse a police search. And so it was just, I found myself just having this conversation over and over again. I worked for an organization, a national organization, to repeal a law that cuts federal financial aid to students with drug convictions. And one of my roles with that was to identify victims, people who've been affected by the law. And you know, I'd had this conversation every single day with someone who wound up losing their federal financial aid because they were caught with a small amount of marijuana. And I always really tried to zoom in. I said, tell me about that police encounter. What happened? You know, what did the police officer say? What did you say? And they would proceed to tell me a story where essentially they consented to the search, or they admitted that they had, you know, contraband on them. They wound up waiving their constitutional rights. They wound up getting, you know, a misdemeanor, you know, conviction, probation before judgment. And at no point during that process had anyone ever informed them that they had a right to refuse the police search. And so I turned in a broken record. I was giving the same, you know, I was having a conversation for one purpose, but then I found myself over and over giving this conversation, and this was about 2001. And I found that, you know, in a post 9/11 world, you know, just nobody knew their most basic Bill of Rights protections, except a few criminal defense lawyers had websites with some basic information about this. And I'm like, well, let's create a website dedicated to this purpose. I started doing little role-playing presentations where I would dress up like a police officer. I had this officer-friendly persona. I had the aviator shades and full uniform. And I would do these role-playing exercises in front of small audiences. And I reached a point where I realized, you know, I can't be doing this thing everywhere. You know, this is an educational video. In 2003, we got some funding to produce our first video called Busted, the Citizen's Guide to Surviving Police Encounters. And we were able to get longtime ACLU Executive Director Ira Glasser to be our on-screen narrator. That video really picked up a kind of a cult status once we released it on YouTube in around 2006, and soon we were able to see hundreds of thousands and soon millions of viewers seeing it. So for the first time ever, we were able to really get a sense of how many people were able to access this. Flash forward to about 2009, we decided to make a bigger, better, and just higher, you know, better budget, something a little more approachable, I think, especially to, you know, African American, Latino audiences, folks who are more impacted by stop and frisk policies. Because the biggest criticism we got of our first video was that this isn't going to work for me. You know, this isn't going to work for, you know, for black people. Like, this is for white people. Those cops were too nice. Which kind of took me aback, because a lot of people thought that they were too nasty and that they never experienced police officers like that before. And so we were able to get additional funding for that. We made a big, you know, just bigger budget, slicker production quality, and I think we really nailed it with 10 Rules for Dealing with Police. It's much more approachable for, you know, high school audiences, whereas the first video we did was a little more rough around the edges. I'll put it that way. Of course, anyone can go on YouTube and watch either the original Busted, The Citizen's Guide to Surviving Police Encounters, or 10 Rules for Dealing with Police, and decide which one they like best. But most of the information, about, you know, 95% of the information, you know, about how to handle police encounter, the basic, you know, do this, don't do that approach is really the same. It's just, you know, different presentation.
Well, that's great. Dr. Vibe, did you have another question, or can I follow up?
No, absolutely. It's your show, so come on now, lady. Come on now.
So, Steve, one of the things that you said that's interesting is you mentioned that with the first, you know, you did the first set of videos that some of the feedback you received was that it wasn't, I guess, realistic for African American or Latinos. What would you say as far as, because the audience that's watching this and who this is for specifically is for parents of teen boys and young men. So what would you say is maybe the basic advice we should give to our sons? Because some of the common sense, I'm a mom of two boys and one's a teen, and one of the common sense advice we give our son is to, don't do anything that will cause the officer to believe that you have a weapon. Like, just make sure that you are compliant, that you just follow whatever he's saying, but memorize his badge number. So what would you say is maybe some of the basic things we should be thinking about?
Right. Now, the thing is, like, once you get past, follow every traffic rule, which is nearly impossible to do, and always be calm and respectful. A lot of these things are common sense, and I fully appreciate that at the point of a police encounter, especially if you're having a long, bad day, and this is the 4th time you've been pulled over for nothing in the past couple of months, it might be one of the hardest things to do to maintain your calm and cool, but there's no time ever where it's more important to stick to that plan. But I don't like to really go on and on and on about that, because it's like, I hope folks, are doing it, and most do, but to sort of go on and on about it, I don't ever want to be accused of, like, blaming the victim if someone does mouth off to the police officer and winds up getting shot in the back as a consequence of it, because there's inappropriate force that's behind a lot of that, and so I don't ever want to be accused of, like, blaming the victim in those situations. That being said, it's a good idea to always remain calm and cool, but, like, once we get past that into getting deeper into the police encounter, where the police officer is ordering you out of your car, get out of the car. Don't complain about it. Always make slow movements, with your hands, especially if you're a young black man. There's just been so many horror stories of, pulling out the wallet and the officer claims it's a gun. So you always want to be very careful with where your hands are and say, "Officer, I'm going to be getting my registration out." Try to slow everything down, take deep breaths. Every motion is deliberate. And it's hard to do because oftentimes officers bark things at you. They're like, "Let me see your license. Get out of the car." And it's hard to not make, sort of respond with quick movements, but you want to take your time, slow down, don't rush anything. And it's important to understand, it's important to comply with certain requests. Stepping out of your car, officers are legally allowed to order you out of your car. Officers, if it's a traffic stop, are legally allowed to pat you down. However, things change when the officer says, "Go ahead and pop your trunk for me. Go ahead and let me take a look inside." This is where your alarm bell needs to go up. You say, "Officer, I know you're just doing your job. I don't consent to any searches." And this is a very important point of law, because if you consent to a search, even if you think that you have to, oftentimes police officers will bark requests, but it'll sound a lot like a command. "Go ahead and let me take a look." It's technically, they're really saying, "Could you please go ahead and open your door for me and comply with this search so that if we do happen to find anything, it will be admissible under the law because you technically voluntarily complied with my request." And that's one of the hardest things to communicate, is you have the right to refuse. So this is, of course, you're trying to follow every traffic law you possibly can. Not an easy thing to do. There are 1,000 reasons police can pull you under the sun and claim that you were weaving between lanes, you didn't fully stop at the traffic stop, and that stop may have been based on racial profiling. But the problem is, in an individual case when you're pulled over, you can never, ever, ever know for sure what's going on inside the police officer's head and heart. And while it's hard to do, you have to assume that they are pulling you over for a reason. And one way to get at that information is say, "Officer, why did you pull me over?" And you want to respond to questions with questions. And even like when commands are barked at you, saying things like, officer, I know you're just doing your job, but I don't consent to any searches. Am I free to go now? That's the other important line that anyone who gets pulled over needs to understand. Beyond, officer, I don't consent to searches, but once you start the interrogation, where are you going? Where are you coming from? Officer, I know you're just doing your job. You're always showing your hands, but I really don't want to answer any more questions. Am I free to go? Am I free to be on my way? This is an important thing to say because it makes it very clear to the officer that you're not voluntarily cooperating. And so much of the law is based on this perception, legal belief of voluntary cooperation. And so it's so important in these situations to make it very clear that you want to withdraw yourself from the encounter, that you're not voluntarily agreeing to this interrogation or any searches. And you have to state that clearly and calmly. And I know it's a hard thing to think that you can refuse a police officer's request in a way that's polite, but you can do it. It's easy to do when you practice it. And again, it takes practice. You might want to look at yourself in the mirror or sort of role play this with friends and family. Say, officer, I don't consent to any searches. Officer, I know you're just doing your job, but am I free to go? Because when you say these things, it actually sends it's a trigger to the police officer because it sends a message that says this is someone who knows a little bit about their rights. Now, this is the point where you do not want to continue along this vein and say something like, I know my rights, officer. I'm going to sue you. Give me your badge number. I would actually advise it's not a necessary good idea to ask a police officer for their badge number. This is a common one that people think is a good thing to do, but frankly, I think it often comes off a little aggressive. Mind you, that should never, ever, ever be used as an excuse by a police officer to respond with force. But it's not necessary in terms of filing a complete police misconduct report. Simply the time, the date, a physical description of the officer, and I would argue the number on the squad car is more valuable in sort of triangulating the information you need for a complete police misconduct report. But the badge number in and of itself isn't going to be a make or break piece of information as much as people are often led to believe that it will be. And so I would actually advise to not ask for the officer's badge number, because when you do that, the officer immediately will go into a mode of what can I say and do in order to basically put myself in the best situation legally. And oftentimes that could translate into the officer using their very vast discretionary power to make an arrest under some BS pretext, contempt of cop reasoning. For example, you can't be arrested for simply mouthing off to the police, but you're disturbing the peace rather. Or you're obstructing justice, arguably, will be the charge. And so I would argue that you simply want to say, officer, am I free to go? Officer, I don't consent to any searches. And really anything else you say beyond that is unlikely to be helpful to you. And if things continue to go down the wrong way and you wind up being arrested, again, you never, ever, ever want to physically touch a police officer at all, because that'll lead to an obstruction charge or assaulting a police officer charge, so easily thrown out, or so easily thrown at people who are disrespectful to police, and that could be a felony. And so you never even want to touch a police officer. You never want to even get physical in any way, and you even want to avoid just sarcasm and sort of trying to match the officer's antagonism if they're coming with it. If they're coming at you with where have you been? Where are you going, boy? Oh, officer, I know you're just doing your job, but am I free to go now? And it's the hardest thing to do, especially when you feel like you're kind of you're getting in that testosterone-y mode. And this is, I think, particularly important for young men. I find that young women tend not to get kind of wrapped up in that kind of alpha male game. And so this idea, too, that you have to match a police officer's disrespect with disrespect, I think is a foolhardy path to go down. I think the manly thing to do is to know your constitutional rights and stay calm and never let a police officer antagonize you into getting physical. A lot of police officers, frankly, they're physical people in general. You know, like they oftentimes are, some police officers will even identify themselves as kind of adrenaline junkies. And there are some cops out there, they don't have a lot going on during the course of the day, and they get into you know, they pull somebody over and there aren't a lot of people around, and they're going to like see if they can try to get this punk whose look they just don't like for whatever reason to try to physically go toe-to-toe with them. And when they do, they're going to bring the entire force of the state down on top of them. And so it's never a game that anyone could possibly win. It's one of those games where the only way to win is to not play it at all.
Okay, good stuff. Steve, have a Marie, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, wow, you know, here I am thinking we were giving him the right advice, and I just learned so much about, you know, I never thought to think about the squad car number. And you're right, it's difficult, especially for teens, I think, of any race, because teens tend to want to exert their, you know, independence and show that they are not going to follow the rules or whatever it is. So being compliant and also asking that the question in the tone that you mentioned can be difficult for some young people to just say, you know, am I free to go, officer, am I free to go? Because anything can probably trigger a police officer, especially, as you mentioned, they had a bad day, or you don't know what's going on in the situation. So your best bet is to put yourself in a position to be safe and to not create a situation where he gets aggressive or angry. So make it so that you are able to, you know, handle the situation in a safe way. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's all I wanted to say.
Good stuff. Steve, got a question for you. Since you've been involved in this journey, have the rights of the police increased?
I mean, it depends how you look. It depends how you look at it. I think really since we released our first video, Busted: The Citizen's Guide to Surviving Police Encounters, you know, people often say, oh, that was from 2003. You know, haven't there been all these Supreme Court decisions that have radically changed the rights of police vis-a-vis citizens? And I said, no, everything in 100% of our videos and our materials has remained appropriate in every single state. There was a decision regarding ID requirement of when you need to show police your ID, the Hybel versus Nevada decision, and it was funny because I sort of like went back to the tape and I watched it. And I'm like, we're still good. You know, we of course provide the information in a very sort of general way where, you know, it survived. And I give a lot of credit to Ira Glasser, who helped with the scripting of it and made sure we say, in most cases, you know, sort of qualifying things like that. Because when it comes down to a lot of this stuff, if you leave it in the hands of lawyers to try to explain this stuff, it won't end, because they qualify everything with a qualifier, and the qualifiers have qualifiers, and so therefore a layperson is just going to kind of shut down, and they're just thinking, what's just the general rule? Just give me like the general rule. And that's where we've come in providing this information. I mean, there are certain exceptions, for example, to when police can come in your home without a warrant, for example. But in the overwhelming majority of situations, if there are police at your door and they want to come in, they come back with a warrant. Where's the warrant? Come back with a warrant. In your home, that's actually one of those situations where you don't have to necessarily even deploy all the pleasantries of a traffic stop, because you have the most expectation of privacy in your home. Just, where's the warrant? Not going to let you in without a warrant. However, on rare occasions, if, for example, police see a suspect with a gun fleeing into a home, the police, because of these exigent circumstances or extraordinary circumstances, could follow into that home without a warrant And if they happen to see after the fact evidence of illegal activity in plain view, for example, sort of a silly example would be a police officer sees someone with a gun after shooting, and they run into a house, and the police run into the house, and it just so happens that the residents of the house, independently of this incident, happen to be engaged in some other ritual murder or something like that. The court would later determine that the officer did not need a warrant to obtain this, and that this evidence is now admissible in court. But these are very, very narrow sort of exceptions. And so for the most part, in the overwhelming majority of circumstances, the information we provide will apply to the circumstances that you are dealing with. And so that's really just where we come in. We just try to present you the most likely scenario and the law as it would apply to that encounter. And if you want to really get geeky and you want to practice law and think about that, you can really explore all of the different very narrow exceptions to the rules. But for the most part, the information we provide are the general rules as they fall under the U.S. Supreme Court, which means that all of our information applies in all 50 states. One of the common questions we get is, the police officers in my area of Texas and Louisiana, like they don't, the Constitution doesn't apply to them. And I'm like, well, actually it does. They're just violating the Constitution. But the Constitution applies to all 50 states, and the information we provide is based on sort of the lowest threshold of rights protection that police in every single state must apply. Did I answer the question? I'm not sure. I kind of went in a bunch of different directions there.
You answered it. I don't know if Dr. Vibe, are you stuck, Dr. Vibe? But no, you answered it. And it's always better to give more information than less. So, did you have another question, Dr. Vibe?
No, okay, we'll go back to you.
Okay, Steve, one of the things, like, what would you say to someone who's watching this and saying, okay, this sounds all great, well, in a real situation, I'm a black man and I'm not going to I can't even ask that question. What do you say to people who just assume or think that it sounds great, but when they're actually in the situation, it won't go that way because a police officer won't listen to them saying, asking a question, that it would go totally the opposite direction. What would be the course of action that you think they should take afterward if they feel like they were violated or they felt that their rights, whatever, were violated? What would you say to that?
Well, the first thing I would say is waiving your rights is never an optimal strategy in a legal sense, and even in just like the fact that you gotta look at yourself in the mirror, the next day and the next day for the rest of your life. I mean, Georgetown University law professor Paul Butler recently, wrote an article in the Washington Post about the right to record police, and he put it this way. He said, "The Bill of Rights is not for wimps. It's sometimes hard to assert your constitutional rights. It's easy to simply do everything a police officer asks you to do. And that's one way you can do it." I always sort of joke, like, we live in a free country. If you can waive your constitutional rights anytime you want to. If a police officer asks to come into your home and search it, you have the right to let the police officer search it. But I would say that you are putting yourself in more dangerous legal ground when you do that. Partly because if it's your car or your home, you never know 100% for sure that you don't have anything illegal that can be found. You never know, like, what a previous owner, a family member, a friend may have left in your car, in your home, stuffed in your couch somewhere, and so you can never be sure. And also, one of the problems is with the fact that most people, I would say about 90 to 95% of situations, they've done some studies of this, that people comply with search requests about 95% of the time. And as a consequence of this, when you ask police officers, why is it that you will search 10 people, tear up their belongings, make them stand or sit on the side of the road, and you don't find any illegal activity? They find it about 1 in 10 situations. Why would you humiliate and harass nine people in order to find evidence of maybe alcohol or maybe a tiny bit of of marijuana? And the reason they say they do it is because, well, people are willingly complying. People are willing to help out. And I kind of scratch my head. I'm just like, really? I don't know. I can understand why they would think that, but you know what? When someone says, sure, officer, go ahead, take a look. I don't have anything to hide with a smile on their face, and I ask the officer, oh, well, did you see the game the other day? I'm like, that's not voluntary cooperation. It seems like it, but it's a lot more like groveling in the face of authority. And this is an ancient response to dealing with what appears to be overwhelming authority. But the fact is, police officers are still constrained by the highest law of the land, which is the Bill of Rights and Constitution. And if you willingly give them up, you make it easier for them to continue along this path where they stop people over and over again, particularly people of color, in disproportionate numbers, and they stop them and they search them because they think that people are willingly complying with what is arguably, an inappropriate and illegal search if they don't have the probable cause to search them, but they're just gaining this what seems like compliance. And so that's the other side of the argument that I would make. And I understand when you're in a situation where if it is hostile and you're really afraid for your life and the officer threatens you if you don't agree to the search, you say, officer, I'm not consenting to the search, but I'm not going to get in your way. I'm not going to interfere with you, officer, but I'm not complying. This is under duress. And then the second part really that I would argue that has really changed everything is, my sign right here is film the police. You have the right to film the police. Everyone in the United States has the First Amendment protected right to film on-duty police. And this is one of the most powerful things you could do is simply taking out your phone, your smartphone. About, I think, like 90% of people have a cell phone at this point, 90% of adults, and about 60 to 70% of those are smartphones that are equipped with a high-powered video camera. And you can use this, and you can start filming. The officer says, put that away. Say, officer, I have First Amendment protects my right to record on-duty police. Why did you pull me over? Officer, am I free to go? Officer, I'm recording you right now using an app that records this off-site. So whatever you say is being recorded right now off-site. So that if the police officer were to actually grab your camera and destroy it, what you've recorded is already off-site. And there's an app called that I recommend called Bamboozer that actually does this. It records off-site, and everyone should be ready. Should have their their recording app on their home screen ready to go. Should practice how quickly they can take it out. Actually, this is a place where you don't want to be doing sort of Wild West pulling at your thing and pointing it at them, because that could be a quick movement that could lead to a terrible outcome. But if it's comfortable, if you're approaching a situation where you see police officers arresting or investigating a suspect in your neighborhood, it looks like maybe a stop and frisk sort of situation that's endemic in cities like New York City, and you're able to approach from a comfortable distance, and you have your camera ready, and you're recording, you want to be ready to flex your constitutional rights. This is an important place. And it is, like I said, the Bill of Rights is for the brave. It is not for the faint of heart. And so when you do record the police, know that you're doing an important thing. Because when the police see that camera, they are going to be on their best behavior. They might not like it. Police aren't yet used to feeling like celebrities with paparazzi following them, but they're getting used to it slowly. Every time there is another high court decision regarding citizens' right to record the police, judges are overwhelmingly ruling that the First Amendment protects your right to record police. Some police departments have gotten the memo, others are a little slower. But police are increasingly understanding and accepting that citizens have the right to record them, and that citizens who get arrested for simply recording the police are winning, six-figure lawsuits as a consequence of this fairly regularly. And so I think within about 3 to 4 years, we're going to have a situation technologically where every single police officer is going to be equipped with a camera, either like hooked up to their glasses or a lavalier or certainly a dash cam. And so at that point, it's simply absurd for the police officer to claim, well, I'm recording you, but you can't record me. And so you're going to have a lot of these instances where citizens are going to be recording, police are going to be recording, and both the citizen and the police officer are going to be on their best behavior. And they have found this over and over again as they've done these test pilot runs with police equipped with these recording devices. They have found that the instances of complaints against the police officers decreased by 60 to 70%, and the instances of police using force against a suspect decreased by a similar amount. And so we're seeing astounding changes that are being made that are for the benefit of everybody. When both parties are being recorded, they're going to be on their best behavior. And so that was one of the things on top of all of the issues that were raised by the tragedy, the shooting of Mike Brown. The first thing that popped into my head was, where was the dash cam video? There was none. The Ferguson police, while they may have had military equipment and Bearcats and infrared glass goggles and 50 caliber rifles with turrets, they apparently didn't put any funding aside for equipping all of their police officers or the officers' cars with dash cams. And I think in 3 to 4 years, it will be a very rare situation where there's an incident like a death at the hands of a police officer, or even a violent arrest, where there wasn't any recording of it. And I would even argue that soon we're reaching a technological tipping point where lack of police video at the point of the arrest or shooting will be considered maybe evidence of a cover-up. And will only work in favor of the plaintiff if they survive the encounter. And so I think this is going to be one of the last high-profile instances of a shooting death where the police officer says one thing and the witnesses say the complete opposite thing. Where was the camera? Why weren't they equipped with a camera? The camera might not have prevented the death of Mike Brown, but at least we would have the truth, and the truth brings us closer to justice.
Definitely, well put. I like what you said there about the truth brings us closer to justice. Are you seeing, with unfortunately tragedies like the Michael Browns or Trayvon Martins, that you're getting more and more people coming to you asking your organization's knowledge about their rights when it comes to stoppages by the police?
Absolutely. I mean, even the American Civil Liberties Union, is contacting me like, oh, we're thinking of doing some Know Your Rights trainings. I'm like, what took you so long? I joke with the ACLU. They've been doing Know Your Rights trainings as well, but their focus has been on the litigation, legislation, and policy realm, rather than sort of direct educational contact. That's sort of the kind of gap that we filled in with this information. And so absolutely, yeah, like folks are Know Your Rights events are very hot right now. Everyone's thinking about them, and I'm glad that we sort of, we have the resources and the materials for folks to put on a really excellent, high-powered Know Your Rights event, and it's simple. All you need is a DVD. And I would recommend, if folks are interested in doing a community event and they're going to be, doing the legwork of the promotion and all that stuff and getting the venue, it's a pain in the butt, but it's the sort of things that community activists do and do well, is you play the DVD, it's 40 minutes long, and afterwards you have a local criminal defense lawyer. I always find is the best person to handle the Q&A. They're glad to do the community outreach. It helps them in their, make more contacts, and oftentimes people in the audience are going to be their clients, potentially. And so they're the best equipped to handle the very gritty Q&A that are almost always, the police did this, can they do that? Or this happened to my friend or my brother or my sister. Are the police allowed to do that? What should I do now? But those events, every time I've taken part in them, the hands go up and they never go down. Everyone, just keeps thinking of more and more questions, but then the questions are just better because people who didn't know a lot about the law, they know how to ask the right questions, and they can refer to, the specific scenes in the video, and they know terms like probable cause, they know terms like reasonable suspicion, they understand when police need a warrant and when they don't necessarily need a warrant in order to conduct a search. And so it creates a perfect dialogue, and everybody leaves these events feeling good about themselves and feeling like they've learned a little bit of something and feeling more confident and prepared during, if they ever face another police encounter, they're likely to if they're young and they're black. But instead of facing the police officer with fear, because of lack of understanding of the law, which all too often translates into hostility and terrible outcomes, they approach it calmly. It sort of reminds me of like any kung fu or karate movie, where the most important thing is you can avoid conflict by having the confidence and knowing that you have the power. You can be calm, during an encounter. And there's such a truism to that, knowing what your rights are and understanding the limits of the police officer's power and understanding the full potential of your own power will radically change the tone of the outcome from the outset. And so when it starts off with, officer, why did you pull me over? Officer, how can I help you? Rather than, why'd you pull me over? Get out of the car, or various F-bombs. It will radically change the tone of the encounter. And again, that is never to suggest that a police officer that responds aggressively or responds with force because a citizen simply mouthed off to them, that citizen deserved it. It's not to say the same thing, so let there be no confusion about that. My urging people to always be calm and cool and knowing their rights at the point of encounter is never ever to suggest that excessive use of police force is ever justified if somebody does not follow that advice.
Great point. Thank you, Steve. Do you offer like workshops, or are your DVDs often shown in high schools or with youth organizations? Because I think that's a missing piece. I think it's so important that we teach our teens and young adults earlier to know what to do, as opposed to, I think we need to be more proactive than reactive. So is that something that's available to high schools and youth organizations?
It is, yeah. Right now, the DVD is available. We're going to be, because of the increased volume of requests, like we're going to be sort of upgrading our package, including the DVD, but as well as other materials and printed materials, workbooks. We're actually in the process of building that out now. Right now, though, the most important and the meat and potatoes of that is the educational video and the DVD is available right now at flexyourrights.org. You can get the DVD for, what is the DVD now? It's $15 plus $5 shipping and handling. We've got T-shirts and that you can get as well. So if you order $50 worth of merchandise, you get free shipping. But really, like, the value of the material, I think, far exceeds that if you consider the cost of a terrible legal situation. You know, it is an ounce of prevention, and I think, and also, of course, all the revenue that comes from the sales of our DVDs and merchandise, it helps us. It helps me continue to, you know, be up at 10 p.m. Talking to the internet and about the value of asserting your constitutional rights. And so it's being put to a good cause. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, so, you know, all donations are tax deductible as well if folks are interested in making a contribution through flexyourrights.org.
Steve, let me ask a conversation piece here. Are schools being more receptive to your message as you go through your journey?
I think absolutely yes. From where we started, you know, folks understand it. This is something that any, you know, civics teacher can understand, and every time high school teachers and college professors show this, the feedback I get is, this was the best class I ever taught. Because whenever I show this video, that kid who kind of sat in the back and didn't really say a lot suddenly came alive and started leading the discussion, because that was often the kid who simply has had the most, oftentimes has had the most encounters with the police officers. And students come up and they tell the teachers afterwards, like, thank you, thank you, thank you. That was the best class we ever had. And teachers tell me this, and they're with delight. And we have high school teachers, professors that once they show the video, they always show it to every single one of their classes, year after year after year after year, and they get the same feedback. The kid that never said anything suddenly is the star of the class, and suddenly is engaged in the conversation surrounding their Bill of Rights protections. You know, the First Amendment, you know, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and so anytime teachers are discussing the Bill of Rights, giving them access to 10 rules for dealing with police will bring what was a very academic conversation about this old parchment suddenly to life. That the Bill of Rights actually means something, and that citizens can actively assert these rights in a way that can protect them in a meaningful way. And the other side of it is when citizens don't know their rights and they waive their rights, that those rights shrink. They're all, you know, rights are really very much like muscles. You have to exercise them in order to work. And so sort of our you know, one of our like slogans is strengthen your Constitution, flex your rights. It really is. The metaphor is just so apt, because it just, you know, in the early days of Flex Your Rights, the comment that I got the most, you know, if you go to our website, you can see our success stories, you know, there's narratives. You can also just go to any of the YouTube videos, and oftentimes people say, this saved my ass, thanks so much, you know, this is great, I love Flex Your Rights, here, and they'll tell their story. The early stories were very often, man, I wish I had known this, because the police really, you know, did a number on me, or I waived my rights, and, you know, I wound up getting arrested for something, you know, something stupid that I did as a kid. And now the comments that we get very much are, oh, I've always known my rights. My dad showed your video, you know, busted to me, you know, a bunch of years ago, and I'm 19 years old, and I've had, you know, a police encounter and with my friends, and I was able to talk to the police officer, and we didn't consent to any searches, and we drove away, and nothing happened. You know, these are our success stories. They're often just like a thing that did not happen, a bad encounter, an arrest that did not happen, a record that no longer exists, that isn't on your record, where you would have to, you know, perhaps lose your federal financial aid or be subject to any number of penalties, you know, including loss of subsidized housing or loss of a job opportunity for doing something that the last 3 or 4 presidents admitted to doing when they were young, but eventually outgrew it when they became responsible men. And so, you know, that warms my heart, you know, when I hear the stories of the incident that did not happen because the citizens knew they learned this stuff in advance. Their parents taught it to them. I mean, basically, this information it's not new. People, you know, organizations and individuals have been teaching this for as long as the Constitution has been around. Primarily, it's been the children of lawyers and cops who've been the beneficiaries of this basic know your rights information. And we simply think, I simply think that this isn't information that ought to be kept in this small class of people, that every single citizen should have access to this. Parents should watch our videos with their, with their kids starting at age, I don't know, maybe like 11, 12. I mean, like, what's that age where suddenly the police aren't acting like your friend anymore? That's the right age to show this to them, I think. And just watch it with your kids, talk about it with your kids, practice these lines, because ultimately asserting your constitutional rights calmly, I think, is protection from the very bad outcomes that can come from fear, that can come from fear leading to hostility, leading to just the worst sorts of outcomes.
I know Marie wants to wrap up. She's going to let me have just one more quick conversation piece. For those parents that haven't encountered flexyourrights.org, what recommendations would you give them to their young people who are going back to school if they encounter a police? What would you suggest to them? What should they be communicating to their young people in regards to this situation?
Stay calm. Assert your constitutional rights. You can be calm, respectful, and not comply with unreasonable requests. In addition to that, I think every citizen should be prepared to flex their right to record the police, like the sign says. Film the police. I think that F adjective is the better adjective than the alternative. Film the police, because it's something that you can do. You shouldn't be encouraging police by having sex with them if they're acting inappropriately. You should film the police. It's the better way to do it. It's an affirmative action. You have the First Amendment right to record the police, and when you record the police, everybody is on their best behavior. Doesn't mean that police officers are always going to take kindly to it, but there's a way to approach it in a way that minimizes the likelihood of hostility. And on flexyourrights.org, I have an article called 7 Rules for Recording Police. It's about 2 years old. I actually need to do an update of it, but the general information is still 100% accurate in terms of the approach when it comes to filming the police, and it encompasses all of the information in 10 rules for dealing with police about how to approach any sort of police encounter, be it a traffic stop on the street, sort of a stop and frisk scenario, or if police are banging at your door asking to come in.
Excellent. Marie, I'm done.
Steve, I'm just like sitting here like, wow, I couldn't even keep up with tweeting everything, but I know one thing: as soon as I'm done, I'm getting the DVD for my son, and definitely will speak to his school about having some kind of workshop or something. I just think, as you mentioned, it's just better to have them prepared, and this is about being proactive, and teens especially, I think, need to know this at this point. And you mentioned something about what age do kids stop being, where with the police, and it's strange that you have to have this transition from when your kids are little, you tell them to go to the police if there's a problem, to the point where they're trying to avoid the police because they don't want to have a confrontation or something like that. And the last thing I would want is for young people to feel that you can't trust any police officer. But I think what you're doing is offering people information so that they understand and know their rights and feel confident in these interactions, as opposed to feeling, defensive. And once you get defensive, that's when all the fear you talked about, that's when you start using this kind of language and start being more aggressive. Any closing? How can people find you? I know you have your website, but also on social media, how can people connect with you? Just want to let people know that this video will be up on the Good Men Project, so you can watch it there, and we're definitely going to stay in touch with Steve and check out the video on his new project, Film the Police, because I think it's so important. But let people know how they can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. Well, there's multiple ways, of course. Flex Your Rights on Facebook. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us, Flex Your Rights on Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Flex Your Rights. You can also join our email list at through flexyourrights.org. I think that's pretty much all the major ones. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's great. Dr. Vibe, I'm going to let you close it out.
Well, Steve, myself and Marie would like to thank you for taking the time out of your, as I like to say, positive, productive schedule and doing what you're doing and equipping not only Americans, but I'm not from America, but now you've made me think and say, hey, do we have these rights north of the border? And I'm going to check that out.
This applies to all of the English Commonwealth nations safely, you know. So for whatever value you attribute to the benevolent power of the crown, all of the Commonwealth, and former Commonwealth nations, this information, people, Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, always ask me, does this work? And I go, yeah, pretty much 100% of it works. The same, general procedures apply in the Commonwealth nations.
Excellent. Well, that's great news to know. We'd like to thank you for taking the time, and it's appreciated, not taken for granted. You've got all this contact information. I'm sure Marie will also make it part of the posts on the Good Men Project. I'm Dr. Vibe. You can catch me at the Dr. Vibe Show. You can catch me once a week on most Sunday, 9 p.m. doing a Black Men's Roundtable. Do you know what time it is? And of course, you can catch me at the Good Men Project. I have a new episode every Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. and also selective other episodes on the Good Men Project. And thank you to Marie for producing and making this happen. We had our challenges, but we didn't get good. We got done. So it's
That's true. And I just want to close out to say that this, again, will be on the Raising Voice section, and I want to thank my editor who works with me in the section, Elisa Word, because she really was the one who connected me and with Flex Your Rights, and Elisa does great work too with our section. So Steve, thank you so much, and keep up the great work, and any way we can support you, you have our support. So thank you for Man You Wanna Be, and see you next month.
You're welcome. Thank you.